Welcome to Where Her Heart Speaks, a show designed to challenge and disrupt ineffective thoughts and behaviors to help you not only embody peace, joy, calm, and certainty, but also to help you live the life you've always dreamed of living. Where Her Heart Speaks with Coach Catherine begins now.
Hi there. Welcome and welcome back. I'm Catherine James, international speaker, best-selling author, trauma-informed coach, and your host for this show, Where Her Heart Speaks. This week, we are diving into something juicy. We are going a bit deeper. And I just want to invite you to right now go ahead, grab your pen and your paper, get yourself comfortable, and get ready to dive in. This is a longer message, so I want to invite you also to have patience. This week, we are talking about the child who lives within your adult body. Tony Robbins once said, "Heal the boy and the man will appear." And I just want to shake that up a little bit, turn it around since I am primarily talking to women, and say, heal the little girl and the woman will appear. One of my most favorite movies of all times is Antoine Fisher. If anyone out there knows me, they're probably chuckling right now because they know that I absolutely love this movie. Antoine Fisher is based upon a true story, and the movie tells a story of a sailor who was sent to the naval psychiatrist because he kept having angry outbursts. Now, initially, upon going to the psychiatrist, Antoine Fisher, who's played by actor Derek Luke, he was opposed to the process. He was opposed to opening up. But eventually, he not only opened up, but he also established a close relationship with his psychiatrist. Now, there's a scene in the movie that I absolutely love, and it still actually touches my heart. But there's a scene in the movie where Antoine shares a poem that he himself had written with his psychiatrist, and they're standing in front of the psychiatrist's fireplace. They're in his home, and Antoine reads the poem, and the very last part of the poem, the last two lines says, "Who will cry for the little boy who cries inside of me?" Yeah, I'm going to pause just a second there. And I'm going to say that this topic will likely require further discussion. And I just think that it's always good to have someone to listen alongside of you. It's good in case you want to discuss it further. It's good in case you want to, just go back and be able to flush things out if needed. Talk about what maybe you experienced, what you heard, or what you took away from it. So I want to say now would be a good time to invite someone to join you in your listening. And then also a little later, I'm going to provide a link to my calendar. And if you need or desire to discuss things further with me, you'll have access. You'll be able to reach out and actually get on my calendar and schedule an appointment so that we can talk. So the movie Antoine Fisher was released in 2002. And while I am sure that I've watched it at least 50 times since then, every time I hear those words, "Who will cry for the little boy who cries inside of me?" my heart literally stops. I'm just like, oh. And I'm guessing probably because it resonated so deeply with me back then. Now, despite the fact that I was already well on my way up the corporate ladder. I had already started my family, purchased a home, and it looked like things were going well on the outside. I knew there was no one crying for the little girl who lived inside of me. And before I jump too far ahead, I want to just take a moment to remind you to take care of yourself. If at any time this conversation starts to make you feel uncomfortable or it begins to bring up uncomfortable memories, please support yourself by choosing to do one of three things that I often will offer. And that's simply to step away for a moment until those feelings have subsided, or step away completely. And if it feels like it's too much, like I said, step away completely, stop listening altogether. And then you can also do a centering exercise. And one that I've shared before is to just pause, take a moment, and bring yourself present. Look around your environment, identify three things that you see, three things that you hear, and three things that you feel. And you're going to feel those three things either internally or externally. Again, I ask that you please take care of yourself. So back in 2002, I had not heard the term inner child. And I often wondered why, as an adult who was truly adulting, like I didn't have anyone to call on, I couldn't call mom, I couldn't call dad, who was truly adulting out there on her own, why someone who was truly adulting, as someone who was truly adulting, why did I so often still feel like a child on the inside? It made no sense to me. I couldn't explain it. And honestly, I was like secretly, I was ashamed and I was embarrassed. So I kept it to myself and I dealt with it in the way that I dealt with many other issues that I had. I overachieved, I perfected, and I suppressed. Like those were my go-tos for survival. And it wasn't until years later that I began to realize I wasn't alone. And specifically, I remember talking with a friend who divulged that she still felt like a child at times in her life. And then I began to hear similar comments. As I got into coaching, I began to hear comments like this from my clients. And then as I got deeper into studying trauma, I saw patterns where many accomplished women felt like children during certain times in their lives. Maybe it was when their parents were around, or they had to deal with conflict, or someone close to them became unhappy. At varied times in their lives, they would feel like this little child. And today, I still hear it and I still see it. Now, you may have heard the term inner child before, or maybe this is your first time hearing the term. You may have never experienced the feeling that I spoke of in terms of feeling like a child on the inside, or it may be more familiar to you than you'd even care to admit. Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist monk, he has a quote that says, "The cry we hear from deep in our hearts come from the wounded child within. Healing this inner child's pain is the key to transforming anger, sadness, and fear." And what I've come to understand is we all have an inner child who, at more times than not, is running our adult bodies. So today, I want to talk about the inner child. I want to help everyone get clear, everyone that's listening, get clear on what exactly an inner child is, why she continues to show up, cues that she's hurting or is wounded, and ways to stop your inner child from running your adult life. Now, Cambridge defines the inner child as the part of your personality that still reacts and feels like a child. The part of your personality that still reacts and feels like a child. Like, that was the most accurate and simplistic definition I could find as I searched for a definition. That part, that part of us that still reacts and feels like a child. Cambridge notes there is, or when we read that, it sounds as though there is only one part. But according to studies, we have many parts. Dr. Richard Schwartz is the founder of the internal family systems model. He defines three parts, three types of parts in IFS therapy. And he calls them the exiles, the managers, and the firefighters. Now, the exiles are the youngest and most childlike. They are the ones that are fun, loving, playful, curious, forgiving, and they are also the ones that are most vulnerable. And when they experience traumatic events, according to Dr. Schwartz, such as being left home alone, called derogatory names, or shamed for being too loud, they suffer deeply, and a lasting imprint is made on this part of us. Now, in an effort to protect the exiles from experiencing more hurt, more pain, there's something called managers. And the managers step in as the controllers over the exiles. These parts show up in the form of the managers. They show up in the form of perfectionism. They are judgmental, and they are controlling. Then lastly, we have the firefighters. The firefighters arrive on the scene when the managers fail to do their jobs of managing the exiles, managing the exiles' behavior, or they fail to do their job in controlling the exiles' emotions. Now, you have to imagine the exiles' emotions are probably all over the place because that's the earliest part of us, right? So their emotions probably can get pretty out of control. So when the managers fail to manage the exiles, then the firefighters show up. And the firefighters show up in the form of denial, suppression, avoiding, substance abuse, overeating, dissociation, and more. So the managers and the firefighters are what I will call trauma responses. They are responses. They show up to protect our inner child, our most pure self, from experiencing any future hurt or pain. So since they are incapable of, say, fighting physically or even mentally, because we don't have a lot of resources when we are young, then we take on these personas. We take on these behaviors in order to protect ourselves and prevent ourselves from experiencing future pain. So I want to say, the woman you are today is a compilation of all of your parts. And while We all can easily identify, probably our managers and our firefighters. We've actually lost touch. We've lost touch with, we suppress, we ignore, and we avoid reuniting with the part of us that is most vulnerable. I want to ask, how often does your managers show up? How often do you see them? How often do you note that you are the person who is trying to do everything right? Like, how often do you note that you're the person who has to arrive early, has to stay late, go above and beyond? You're the person who has to be on every board, trying to control everyone and everything, seeing fault in everything and everybody, including you. How often? How often does your manager show up? How often does your firefighter show up? Isolating yourself, suppressing your emotions, staying busy, over drinking, overeating, disconnecting. How often? And even though they may be keeping us from fully expressing ourselves, I want to say, even though your managers and your firefighters may be showing up so often that we have an inability to fully express who we truly are, or doing that thing that we really desire to do, even though they may cause us to do things or say things or act in ways we may actually regret, it is so important to appreciate them. It's so important not to make them wrong. We've made it this far because of them. And we are missing a part of ourselves, right? So it's being able to hold both of these truths. We've made it this far because of them, and we are still missing a part of ourselves. So I just want to kind of play with this and say, what if we looked at our inner being as we do our outer parts or our outer self? So for instance, we probably would all agree that we would be disabled, or at the very least limited, if we lost a body part, if we say lost a hand, if we lost an eye, or may even a toe, right? We would have some type of limitations. We would be altered and lack the ability to fully perform in our full capacity. Like, we may be able to go on, but we would have a deep knowing that we weren't whole. We would have a deep knowing that something was missing. Even if it were the toe, where we could cover it up, we could put on a shoe and maybe no one else would know. We would still know that something was missing. So as we consider the why of our inner child continuing to show up, we must understand that all children want to be seen, they want to be heard, acknowledged, and loved. And your inner child is no different. Her appearance is simply an indicator that she has an unmet need and unhealed wounds. So as we think about our outer body missing a part, our inner child's appearance is telling us that our inner body is missing a part. So we need to listen. And I'm going to say not listen. Not need to. We don't need to, right? We get to. Listen, I was just talking to a client and we talked about the energy underneath need to and get to. Need to feels like we have no other options. We have no other choice. It takes us out of choice. And that just feels so suffocating. So I want to change the language there. And instead of saying need to, I want to say get to. When we realize we always have a choice, we get to say get to. So we get to listen to our inner child. And in choosing to listen, you get to help her heal. In choosing to listen, you get to help her heal. And this is so necessary. Like again, I talked about us being able to hold our two truths, the parts that kept us safe, our managers and our firefighters keeping us safe. We don't want to make them wrong. We want to appreciate them because they kept us safe, and there is a part of us missing. So it's necessary to heal that part so that we can bring all parts of us together. When we heal that part, we get to reconnect with the parts of us that we currently hide, ignore, or avoid. When you help her heal, you get to experience love fully. You get to experience sheer joy. And I like to just think like uncontrollable laughter. You get to be curious. You get to forgive others. When you help her heal, you get to accept all of who you are. And I'd say you get to live fully or live sensationally. When you help her heal, you get to create safety and security for that part or those parts of you that need safety and security. Now, before I share ways to stop your inner child from running your adult life, I want to share some cues or ways for you to identify she's present. Like some of us have lived in this for so long, we have no idea this is not actually who we are. This is not our purest self. This is not our most authentic self. Now, I've already shared a few, such as arriving early, staying late, overcommitting, judging, but I also want to share a few more. And I'm going to say that this is in no way a comprehensive list, but some of the more common things I've seen, as well as some of the things I've experienced. So the first is abusive relationships. If you find yourself in one abusive relationship out after another, your inner child is likely crying. The next is people pleasing. If you always go out of your way, even at the cost of sacrificing yourself to make sure someone else is happy, that's an indication that your inner child is crying. And then we have rigid boundaries. If you're closed and you won't let anyone get close to you physically nor emotionally, your inner child is likely crying. And then a failure to express, and I'm going to say air quotes, negative emotions. Air quotes, because there are no negative emotions. Emotions are just emotions. But an inability to express what is perceived as negative emotions is an indication that your inner child is crying. So I ask, who will cry for the little girl that cries inside of you? In the movie, the psychiatrist asked Antoine, "Who will cry, Antoine?" And Antoine replied, "I will." He said, "I will cry for the little boy who cries inside of me." And I remember when I came to a point in my life when I too had to say, "I will cry for the little girl who cries inside of me." When I decided to let my grown woman self run my adult life, the first thing I chose to do was acknowledge my little girl. What I realized was that I had been treating her the way I had been parented. I had been telling her basically to sit down and shut up. I had been ignoring her and acting as though she didn't exist. So I had to choose. I had to choose to see her. I had to choose to spend time with her. I had to choose to hear her. And that's the first step I want to give you in ensuring that our inner child doesn't continue to run our adult life. The first thing you want to do is acknowledge her. In addition to acknowledging her, I chose to acknowledge her pain. You see, suppressing feelings and emotions, that was my way of navigating the painful times of my life. That was my way of navigating in most of my adult years, if I were to be honest. But I chose to connect with her. I chose to connect with her pain. And I had to allow it to come up however it came up, be it crying uncontrollably, yelling and cursing, letting someone see me angry, which I would not do because I always had to look like I was in control of it, of all situations, or if it was just sleeping. Whatever it was she wanted to do, I provided that space for her. I provided that space for her to just do it. I remember working with one of my clients, and we were working through this process. And as she was acknowledging her little girl's pain, she said, "Oh, I just feel like I want to flip the damn table." And I remember I told her to just imagine herself flipping the table. There's a little trick here, like our mind and our bodies don't know the difference between reality and imagined experiences. So as we were going back to heal her inner child, that was the desire for that inner child. And sometimes we have to move our bodies in order to complete the healing process, to go all the way through. What was funny, and my inviting her to flip the table, her firefighters quickly came to the rescue. And as she went to stand up, she fell back down into her seat. And I said to her again, stand up and flip the table. And so she did. But after the exercise, I asked her about falling back to her seat, like what was happening. She's a strong woman, and I know that she can stand up without even the help or the aid of her hands. But what she said is that there was something inside of her telling her not to behave that way. Like that behavior was inappropriate. And what I will say to that is simply her firefighters hadn't yet figured out that her grown woman was taking over. And that's what we have to do. We have to train our inner child. We have to train our little girl that our grown woman self is going to take over. And that's not a training in simply stating it. It's a training in simply helping her to feel it. Now, what I will give as my third way to stop the inner child from running your adult life is to acknowledge that healing is needed. Solicit the help of somebody who is qualified and capable of supporting you. And then do the work that's needed to fully function. And I'm going to say, as I say in my book, The Sensational Woman, to fully function, and love and embrace your greatest asset, you. All parts of you. And I just want to really express, as you are looking for someone to travel down this path with you, make sure that you find someone who is capable and qualified. Oftentimes we want to go to our friends and talk to our friends about things, but in most cases, our friends are not qualified. And at best, all they can do is give you their opinion, which will not heal your inner child. So someone who is capable and qualified. Qualified, I often like to recommend that when you are doing this type of work, one, you can do IFS as a method. So you will want to find a therapist who is licensed or qualified to perform internal family systems therapy, or a trauma-informed therapist, a trauma-informed coach, such as myself. Make sure, and sometimes I'm also going to say, do your due diligence. Don't just accept someone because they have a title or because they have a credential. I remember, I think last year I reached out to a therapist myself because I was dealing with something with my parenting style. Now my children are adults, but I was still, what I will say now, over parenting, but I reached out to a therapist and it was not a good experience. It was not a good experience for me. And I know many people who have come to me who've said they have worked with therapists on certain issues and they just did not move from where they were. So I say all that to say, do your due diligence or your homework and make sure that you get with someone who is truly qualified and capable of helping you to heal those parts of you. Now, if you are like I was, and maybe you've accomplished much in life and sometimes you still feel like a child on the inside, or if you now realize not all of your parts are connected, or your managers and firefighters are keeping you stuck in a place that you no longer desire to be, or if you have some stuff that's maybe surfacing that you'd like to discuss further, I want to invite you to schedule a free clarity call with me by going to www.calendly.com/Coach Catherine. Catherine is Cathrine. So you can go there and just schedule a session under clarity call. Okay. And I will say, I am not a therapist. I am a coach who is trained to do work around trauma. And if we connect and I determine that you will be better served by a licensed practitioner, then I will ask and recommend that I refer you to someone that I trust. So, one final quote. It takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. This week, my prayer is that you will acknowledge your inner child. I pray that you will acknowledge her pain and that you will have the courage to begin her healing journey so that you can grow up and become who you really are. As I close, I want to remind you that in this life, we get to choose. So choose to listen for where your heart speaks and choose to live a sensational life. Peace and blessings.
Thank you for listening to Where Her Heart Speaks with Coach Catherine, where Catherine aims to challenge and disrupt ineffective thoughts and behaviors to help you not only embody peace, joy, calm, and certainty, but also help you live the life you've always dreamed of living. Follow Catherine on Facebook and Instagram at I Am Catherine James and visit www.catherinejames.com. Remember, to live the life of your dreams, you must go within and return to the place where your heart speaks.